Alright, welcome to another one of my non-duality videos. Today I wanted to talk about this feeling that seems to be kind of inherent in being a human being, that something needs to change. That something always just needs to change. No matter where we get to in life, no matter what we have, it always just feels like something needs to change. And even when we get things kind of perfectly the way we want it, there's always that little voice that seems to jump in that this isn't quite right, or that something could be better about it. Now, if I were to just sit here quietly for a few minutes, even a few seconds, then you would probably begin to feel this feeling pretty strong. And I would feel it myself too, that something needs to change, something needs to happen, that I'm here for a reason, and obviously it's not to just sit here and be quiet. So the quiet itself wouldn't quite be satisfying. There would have to be something. I have to be saying something important, and you have to be getting something out of this in order for it to kind of cover up that feeling that something needs to change. Now, the feeling itself could be seen as kind of a beneficial thing, as far as constantly growing, constantly evolving and progressing and achieving. You could say that maybe if this feeling wasn't so strong, that maybe we wouldn't achieve so much as a human being. And that is fairly true if you look at it. But does achieving things actually make the world a better place? Is a pretty important question I think we could start with. Now, in the past 1,000 years, and obviously I have no idea, but I'm going to kind of assert that this feeling of dissatisfaction and this feeling that something could be better has increased in humans. It used to not be quite so strong back when we were in tribal times, and people were kind of more alright with just kind of floating through life, just surviving, just getting by. Obviously I can't know if that's true, but I'm going to suggest that possibly this feeling of being dissatisfied with what already is has increased. And that has led to our species discovering so many new things and creating so much on this planet. I mean, if you look at a place like New York City or any other major city or even neighborhoods, it's just astonishing how much humans have changed about the planet. Now, if we look at the overall happiness of the human species right now, I would say, and this is also just a complete suggestion, I have no graphs or data to support it, but I would assert that we are actually the least happy that we have been in our history, as far as our recorded history. I mean, who knows what was going on 100,000 years ago, but I would say our general happiness is less than it used to be, and I would definitely say I'm fairly confident that it's definitely not higher than it used to be. So, all of this achieving, all of this getting our goals and creating new things, what has really improved? See, the concept of improving is just that. It's just a concept. If we really break it apart and look at it, I think it becomes pretty clear that nothing can actually improve in this world. It's only our human perspective that will say one thing is better than another thing. But actually, no thing can be better or have more value than another thing. It's only it can have more value to me, or to us, or to our species. See, if you think about, let's say a mass murder happened, some shooting, there's a lot of shootings going along lately, especially here in the United States. I hear of a lot of terrorist activities happening overseas in Europe, places like that. A lot of pretty bad things are happening as far as humans inflicting pain on other humans. And if we look at that from our perspective, obviously we'll say that is a bad event. That event makes the world worse. But is that factually true, or is that just true from the perspective of this human being that's looking out into the world? So from the perspective of a mosquito, that could be a really good thing, actually. Humans dying, there's less humans on the planet, less of them to, well, maybe not a mosquito, because they like to suck on our blood. They probably want quite a few humans to be around, but tons of other animals. Let's say a lot of the ocean animals, which we seem to be kind of killing at an alarming rate today. From their perspective, would a mass shooting be a bad thing? I don't think so. So, the idea of benefit or loss or gain or some type of loss or negative impact is purely an idea. Doesn't actually happen as a fact in reality. So this feeling of that something always needs to change, if you ask a lot of philosophers, a lot of my friends even would say that that's a good thing to have as a human, because it provides us with a source of energy and a source of motivation to change things. But what have we changed as a human society? What have we made better? Now, if we go along with the ideas that I just presented, it's easy to see that nothing on the planet has actually improved. Now, look at the planet. Let's say the Earth itself had a perspective. Over the past 1,000 years, has the Earth gotten any better? Or 10,000 years, 20,000 years? Has the Earth actually become a so-called better place? What about from the perspective of a molecule? Is it possible from the perspective of energy, for something to actually be better? Let's say even if the entire planet was destroyed, what would actually be lost there? Now, a lot of human lives would be lost, and our brain is very highly programmed to think that the loss of human life is actually a bad thing. But where would all of the energy from that planet, let's say it blew off into 1,000,000 pieces, would that amount to there being less of something in the universe? No, science will tell us that energy never gets created or destroyed. It only disperses and changes form. So from that perspective, even something as horrible as the planet exploding would not actually be a negative as far as seeing things from the entire perspective of the whole of the entire universe. Now, as far as consciousness goes, we can't confirm or deny that there is more consciousness out there somewhere in the world, that if our consciousness ended, that consciousness itself would still be continuing somewhere. We can't speak on that really, because we have no idea if this is the only planet that has consciousness, which could be, but seems very, very unlikely to me. I think we can draw somewhat of a conclusion, or at least some educated guesses on when looking at this idea. And that is, I think it's very easy to see, or maybe not easy, but it's fairly obvious that everything is infinite as far as the mind can comprehend that idea. I mean, whether taking a tiny piece of something, that thing is infinite. If you were to zoom in on it, you could zoom in infinitely towards whatever it is, and there would always be more and more and more. Like if you've ever looked at a fractal, that is infinite, and that is how the universe is if we look at it. So if I think back to before I was born, which obviously I can't think back to that, there seems to have been nothing, and then all of a sudden there was something. So just observing this idea, I think it's very logical to say that if all of this were to end, that there would still be something out there simply because it is infinite. There would still be, and honestly, how do we even know that life has value? How do we even know that there is not some other form of existence, or that maybe the idea of existence itself isn't necessarily what this is all about? So yeah, obviously we can't really draw too many conclusions from that, because that steps into the unknown. We just don't know that. So back to my original idea, this feeling that something needs to change. What has that brought our society? Well, it's brought tons of war. It's brought pretty much the destruction of the planet. We're on the brink right now of turning the planet into something that is actually won't be inhabitable. And I will assert that that is happening because of the humans' inability to be satisfied with what we have. So when we look at these billionaires, which, you know, we could for now we could at least place most of the blame on these huge corporations and government corporations, things like that. Let's even though it's technically all of our fault, we could say that most of the blame could be put on these huge corporations as to the destruction of the planet. Now, I don't have millions or hundreds of thousands of dollars, so if I imagine myself having an extraordinary amount of money, to me it would seem that that would be satisfying enough that I could essentially end my career and just go have fun for the rest of my life. But there's plenty of people out there who have millions, billions, and I think I remember reading recently that somebody or one company is worth over $1 trillion now. $1 trillion. I believe it was Amazon. But if you think of $1 million, I could have so much fun with just 1 million. Now let's time that by 1,000 millions, and that's 1 billion, and that just seems like an incomprehensible amount of money you could never run out. And then times that billion by another 1,000, and you have 1 trillion, which is just enough money to change the world, really. You could do so much with that. But these people still are not satisfied, and you can tell by the way that they act that they're still not happy with what they have. They still ignore the damage we're doing to the planet and continue cutting corners and doing whatever it takes to make more profit. And that's because all that they've achieved, they still don't feel satisfied with what they have. So these people, I mean, from my perspective, it seems that they're willing to destroy the planet even to get a little bit more profit. And that is because of this inherent human trait, which may not be inherent in everybody, but is definitely inherent in me, and definitely inherent in pretty much everybody that I see. But it's not inherent in dogs. I mean, my dog is right over there right now. Let me go ahead and show you real quick. There he is. Jojo! Look how happy she is, just sitting there. They do that. They just sit there for most of the day. They just sit there. They're actually kind of an inspiration to me because they just sit there and sleep as much as they possibly can and are always in a good mood, really. They never come off as they do get a little antsy sometimes if they get too much energy, but they never come off as this kind of human need to, like, they never really seem bored, which humans are always bored. I'm always bored unless I'm gaining something or achieving something. I mean, that's the best way for me to fill that need of boredom. I know a lot of people can just kind of watch TV or just do kind of a monotonous task. But for me, I'm addicted to the feeling of getting something and becoming something. It's definitely, I think it's a little bit more prominent in the male mindset, but obviously it kind of can vary from human to human. What they need to satisfy their boredom. I would say in a lot of people it's definitely true that they need to be achieving something or gaining something in order to satisfy this kind of feeling of lack. And it's never enough. For me, it's never been enough. I've never achieved something and was just like, oh, okay, now I don't need to do anymore. Now I can die knowing that I achieved what I need and my life has been valued. And I have had thoughts go through my mind like that. Like when I made my album, there was some thoughts that said, okay, now at least I made an album with my life. Now I can now if anyone wants to hear about me or hear how my life was, they can listen to that. And my life is satisfied and good enough. And those thoughts didn't carry any weight, any meaning really for more than a couple minutes. And then the mind is like, all right, what's next? So I would say that this feeling of being dissatisfied is actually ruining the planet, ruining the human species. And so we're using up all our resources, and we're trying as hard as we can, and it's still not even creating a satisfying experience as a human being. We've turned the dial past 10 all the way to 11 to 20, way farther than the dial can turn, just to feel like life is worth living, and it's still not enough. Now that's just simply not sustainable. And the thing is, kind of one way to look at this whole idea is this feeling of being dissatisfied may kind of be our way out, because people are now becoming dissatisfied with the fact that we're destroying the planet. So now if they're dissatisfied with that, that may be enough motivation for some people to create solutions to that problem of destroying the planet. But any major change, any major solution is going to face so much friction, because we have to change the way that things are right now. And I can almost put myself in the mindset of one of these billionaires where they're just like, oh, I'm almost there. Let me just rip off a little bit more people. Let me just keep drilling oil just a little bit more, and then I'll be there, and then I can stop and say I had enough money, and then we can start working on more green alternative options. But that you never get to where you think you're going. They're always just, okay, maybe once I make this next big deal, maybe after I buy this next skyscraper, that'll be enough. And it may not even be conscious, but just this feeling of just almost there. Just let me just double my money one more time, and then I'll have enough. Then we can start working on more important things. So, and you can see it everywhere with people that are trying to make the world a better place, actually, by creating solutions for global warming and pollution and trash and sustainable farming and fishing and hunting and things like that. But they face a seemingly insurmountable amount of resistance from the people who are profiting off of how the system is right now. And those people aren't going to change easily, because they still aren't satisfied with what they've made so far. So I think that one of the greatest healing things that can happen to humans as of right now is to, I want to use the word learn, but it's not necessarily something that can be learned, but shift our perception from a perception of not being enough to a perception that this is already enough. And I mean, the only way to really go about that change is to run on this treadmill long enough that you get tired of the treadmill and decide to step off of it. So can you see this feeling happening in you? Can you see areas in your life where it's never enough? Or maybe it's your entire life. I know a lot of my life always kind of feels that way. Something always needs to change. And to some degree, I can't really think of or even offer a solution to this problem, because we kind of step right into a paradox if you think about it. Because the feeling that something needs to change can't just be turned around on itself and feel that we need to change the feeling that something needs to be changed. See how that's kind of still just feeding into that same feeling. So if if there would be any advice, which I wouldn't want to really offer any advice in this video, it would be to just notice the feeling and kind of question, is it even valid? Is it real? Is it true? Is what it's saying, is it actually going to bring anything helpful or that's factually helpful or meaningful or positive? And really, the whole idea that there is no such thing as positive or negative, or good or bad, or wrong or right. I mean, those things have never been observed or seen and are purely opinions, and we know they're opinions because if you ask multiple people, they'll all tell you different things. If you ask multiple people what color the sky is, they'll say blue. And even though that is just a word, the sky is actually not this thing called blue. But it's a direct experience sort of thing. People look at it and see that it is this color. But if we say, is it good to make a lot of money? You'll get a variety of different answers. Even if you ask, is it good if the human population dies? You probably get a variety of different answers because there's somewhat cynical people out there that don't really enjoy the way life is right now, which kind of is because of that feeling that nothing is ever good enough. And they kind of carry an attitude of that, well, maybe humans, maybe we could have a lot of the population die, and maybe that wouldn't be such a bad thing, because they kind of feel like their life isn't really worth living. I mean, to a certain degree, I think if you really investigated it, a lot of people, they would kind of have this mentality of like, what are we doing here? Like, why all the effort for nothing? Why so much hard work? Why do I wake up and go to work every day just to come home and have nothing to do really, and then just try not to go to sleep because I knew as soon as I go to sleep I have to wake up and go back to this job that I don't like, and there's only brief moments of actual satisfaction throughout our day as a human being. And even people who don't have to work every day, the mind is just will torment them endlessly because it's like you can't just sit here and do nothing today like that. I know one of the main things that I would always observe my mind do is I would wake up, and one of the first thoughts I'd have in the morning is, okay, what did I accomplish yesterday? Do I deserve to have a happy day today? Do I deserve to feel good? Because if I didn't accomplish anything yesterday, then my brain automatically imparts this feeling of contraction and worthlessness, and that's a survival technique, really. That's a survival technique of the mind, because the reason why humans rose to the top of the food chain is because of this feeling that I'm talking about, this feeling of being dissatisfied and that it's never quite enough. It has kept us constantly busy and constantly looking for different routes that we can outsmart all the other animals. I mean, it's probably been a very useful trait for humans to have up until this point. Which there seems to be a lot of these survival traits that we still carry around that seem to make our life fairly miserable now, and is also having a seemingly negative impact on the world. But this feeling of being dissatisfied with everything has kind of pulled us through evolution and pulled us to the top of the food chain. I think, anyway. That's just a theory. Because let's say there's another animal like my dog, that just kind of sits around and is content with just sitting around, like its belly's full, and the puppies look happy, so they have what they need, so they just kind of sit there and relax. Now, if you're well, obviously you're a human, but I was gonna say if you're human, but um, most humans, if you just sit there and relax for, let's say, 2 hours straight, and you're not doing anything, that's gonna be a very difficult task for most humans to do. You just sit there. We're oftentimes gonna feel like, okay, let's start creating a checklist or a to-do list in my brain. I need to make sure that I am not just wasting this time here, and that I go out and do more things so that my life is more meaningful, and so that I can acquire more of these things that are supposedly going to make me happy. And that's where I think meditation does have benefits, is because it kind of meditation is a really funny thing, because if you most people go into meditation thinking that they're doing something, that this is just another thing to do on their checklist. And that's why most people have such a difficult time with meditating, because they're thinking, oh wow, this is really good for me. Look at all the benefits I'm getting of this meditation. And while you're doing that, you're not actually meditating. Meditating, from my perspective, is actually the relaxation of this need for something to change, or this relaxation of the need for benefit and for trying to get something out of life. Because that is a tension. The feeling of I need to get something, I want something, that's a tension in our brain. And that tension, all it does is when we achieve something, it just relaxes. And then that tension's not there, and we're like, oh wow, I actually feel happy. And it must be because I achieved something. So achieving something gives me happiness, but it's actually just the brain relaxing that constricted feeling in the brain. It just puts on there just because we're not doing something. And then it relaxes once we know that we have achieved something. And you can't lie to your brain and say I've achieved something. It's smarter than that. It needs proof to a degree. We're not actually in control of our beliefs. Our beliefs are controlled entirely by what proof we have around us. So we can't believe that we're achieving something and get a good feeling from believing that we're achieving something. There has to be proof for it. But if you do want to try meditating, which I can see a lot of benefits on the human level, from the non-dual perspective, I don't think there's anything really to get from meditating as far as enlightenment or relaxing the me, the sense of identity, reducing that. I don't think there is actually anything to get from meditation, except for if you do it correctly, or in other words, if you stop doing it, because that's what meditating is. It's not a doing, it's the absence of doing and absence of the need for a doing. Then you can get a few hours of relaxation, or a few minutes, however long you do it. But then that can kind of carry off maybe 10, 15 minutes or an hour after you meditate. You'll kind of be in that place still where everything kind of just seems fine. But as you go about your day, that constriction comes back and starts to convince you that something needs to change again. Even though while you're meditating, that constriction was relaxing and you didn't feel like anything needed to change. Not even your thoughts. You didn't even need to stop your thoughts. Your thoughts didn't need to change if you did it correctly. So most people go into meditation with the idea that I need to quiet my mind, but if you think about it, that's just another task. That's another thing on the to-do list, another effort. And meditation is the relaxation of effort, including the relaxation of trying to change the way your thoughts are going. So, like I said, I don't think there is any tips or any advice. I wouldn't say that meditating can necessarily decrease this constricted feeling that something always needs to change. But I think that exploring these ideas are entertaining, if nothing else, and can at least help you see it for what it is. And it doesn't need to change. The feeling that something needs to change also doesn't need to change. Because if you get rid of the feeling that something needs to change, that won't be another gain. That won't be something to gain. Even though there may be a more relaxation. But if you see it as a gain, then the feeling itself will always be involved in it somehow. The whole idea of a gain from this perspective, it can usually just be seen as the relaxation of the feeling that something needs to be gained. See this? I don't need to say anything else. If when I stop talking there's a feeling that like, oh, where's this going? When is he gonna say something again? I felt like I was getting something from this video, and now where'd the talking go? And now I'm not getting something anymore. And I can feel it in myself too. Of, oh, I felt like I was saying things that felt kind of important as they were coming out, and now I can't think of anything else. So that constricted feeling starts to come back and say, think of something. Well, I think that's all that's going to be coming out of this mouth for now. So thank you for watching. Feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed it. If not, then hopefully I'll see you on some of my other videos. Take care.